Are you thinking about moving to Toronto, but you want to get the real goods? Well, then this video is for you. In this video, I'm going to share with you a podcast that I did called Want to Move Here. And in that podcast, the host interviews agents from around the world about moving to their individual cities. And he interviewed me about moving to Toronto, and he digs deep. So if you want the real goods, then this video is for you. So let's get to it. Hi everybody, my name is Connie Sarvananthan and I'm a real estate agent here in Toronto and the GTA, and welcome to Living in Toronto. This channel is all about living in Toronto, moving to Toronto, and buying and selling real estate in Toronto. In this video, I'm going to share with you a podcast that I did called Want to Move Here. This is going to be a two-part series. The actual podcast was an hour long, but I cut it down to 40 minutes, so each of the parts will be about 20 minutes. The first part will deal with things like landscape and weather and transportation. And then the second part will deal with things like employers and entertainment and of course housing and what you can expect to pay in Toronto. So the podcast is done by a gentleman named Derek Bicksler, who's a real estate agent in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and he interviews agents from around the world about moving to their cities. So you can find things like Portugal, you can find places like Nigeria. He does cities all throughout the US and Canada. So mine is specifically about moving to Toronto. So let's get right to it.
So let's talk about the weather. We talked about it a little bit, but so I'll start with what it's like here, what we're comparing it to. No, I always forget this. I want to bring the map up, share my screen, and show everybody where Toronto is in case they don't know. And I forget this every single time. Here we go. There we go. Okay, so we got our map here. You can see the pin, and that's Toronto, and we'll zoom in. You can see it's up to the left of New York, to the right of Michigan, and it sits right on, or at least Toronto City proper sits right on Lake Ontario there. So where's Chicago? Detroit's a little bit south, looks like, of Toronto. So, and Chicago's
Detroit's
south
about
too.
3.5, 4 hour drive. Buffalo's about an hour to an hour and a half drive from Toronto.
So that gives everybody an idea, at least, what we're talking about, because I'm learning things too. Like, I didn't know that was right on the water. I knew whereabouts Toronto was, but I didn't,
Yeah.
So what's the weather like? So is it, do you get a lot of precipitation because you're on the lakes there?
Not necessarily. No, I mean, our waterfront is very akin to, say, a Chicago. So it's a big freshwater lake, and Toronto is actually surrounded by the Great Lakes. So you have Erie, because of our proximity to Erie, we're right near there, and we're also close to Huron. So there's lots of water all around. There isn't extra precipitation because of the proximity to water. And even I've lived close to the water and there isn't anything extra because of it.
Not like living next to the ocean, or maybe I'm talking out of my butt there too. Maybe that's not true either, but you do get some snow, I think. And I want to know a little bit about that. Do you do schools close and stuff when you get snow? Do they salt? What's it like when it snows there?
Yeah, so when I said so we are a 4-season country for sure, and a 4-season city for sure, and we definitely get lots of snow. The snow comes and goes, quite honestly, and over the past few years, it's been very inconsistent. But school closures maybe once or twice a year. It's not that common, or it's not what you would think, only because we as a city are very prepared for snow. So the plows are out. The plows start in November. They go until March. Like it's just a winter city. So They know how to manage it and everything else. The times when school closes is when there's a huge amount of snow and the plows just can't get to it and the roads become unsafe. So the school buses become unsafe and things like that. But on a regular basis, my kids walk to school in snow. They come home in snow. They've been doing that since they were, they're in high school now, but they've been doing that since they were 4 years old. Everybody gets dressed in their snowsuits and their snow pants. And, I think one of the biggest things about being a parent in a winter climate is that you lose about a half an hour a day in the winter with getting your kids all dressed up and then getting them all undressed. And I remember a friend of mine moving to Florida, and she was like, that's one of the big time savings that she found in Florida, is that she didn't have to do that. Now she's also dealing with other things that I wouldn't necessarily want to deal with, but everything has its pros and cons for sure.
Yeah, totally. And I know you did some research for some temperature conversions. So
Yeah.
tell us what does it get down to when we're in the
So
winter?
Yeah, so I think November, December, January, February, those are like November, you start to get out of fall and into winter. December, January, February are usually when people start to do their skiing and things like that. That's about, and on average, we're at 0 degrees here, Celsius, which is about 30 degrees, 32 degrees, I guess, in Fahrenheit. So that's what we're talking. There's definitely much colder days, but there's also much warmer days. We also get a lot of sunshine, which helps. So, I've looked at, even when I lived in San Francisco, sometimes the lack of sun can, not be fun. I love the fact that even on the coldest day, you will get some beautiful sunshine. And so that can make a difference on your outlook. But that said, my body remembers I'm Sri Lankan. And so I am like that cold person that is always cold. And there's probably 4 or 5 days a year where I'm like, I'm not leaving the house. I'm not doing anything. I'm staying in. Meanwhile, my husband and my kids are outside and they're skating or they're doing the tobogganing or doing something. So it all really depends on your attitude towards the snow. But I love like a nice hot chocolate sitting outside and watching them, but it's just not, it's not like I'm I love winter person, but it's very manageable.
Yeah, it's pretty if nothing else. When the snow's on the trees and all that, it's pretty, and you get to watch your family have fun and chill with some cocoa. It sounds pretty good, actually. Oh,
Yeah,
I'd like to do
exactly.
the other thing and then do what you're doing afterwards. You could have it sitting there waiting for me when we're done doing the other thing.
Exactly.
Um, so
And
have
then,
you? Go ahead.
oh, the one thing I want to mention is we do have areas, like we have a ski area. Now, the ski area it's high for us, but it's not going to be, like we're not talking, if you want real skiing, you want to go to like Mount Tremblant or Whistler. But we definitely have like a great ski area that a lot of Torontonians go to in the winter. It's called Blue Mountain. And so that's the other thing, is that we have a lot of friends who are skiers. They don't play hockey, but every weekend they go up and they ski. So skiing is another big thing that you can do in the area. And there's several, I mean, that's just one area. There are different areas throughout Toronto that you can get to. Probably, Blue Mountain is probably an hour and a half, and the others are an hour to an hour and a half. So it's not that far. And people make it a day trip. Some people have homes up there, but skiing is another big winter activity.
And what's the main? How do you heat your houses? Main like here you'll see heating oil, electric heat pumps, natural gas. As of now, every new neighborhood is natural gas because we have it coming out our butts and it's the cheapest and burns. Blah blah blah. So natural gas probably number one, and then some other remnants of other stuff. What do you guys heat with up there?
Yeah, that's basically it. Anything that was, I'd say, 1950 and younger is going to be natural gas. Like we have a forced air furnace here. Some of the older homes, you're still gonna see some boilers. You're still gonna see some rads. There are, depending on the age of the home. But if somebody is building a home or moving into something that's newer than 1950, you're gonna see forced air gas. So that's pretty typical. Now, when we bought our hobby farm at Barrie, which is just outside of Toronto, it's about an hour away. It was forced air oil. So, and it had an oil tank that they filled. There's people that come and fill our oil tanks and things like that, but that is not typical here. And our hobby farm is also, we have a well and we have a septic, versus Toronto. It's all city sewers and city water. We're pretty well a major city, so we are a major city, so everything is pretty modern.
When we talk about the prices, people will get that you're a major city. We'll get that in a little bit. So the cold climate, I'm guessing you have basements, because most cold climates have basements.
We do have basements, and basements are very much part of living space here. Considered part of living. I mean, we don't count it when we put a listing up. So, if we have a 3,000 square foot home, that means it's 3,000 square feet above ground. So that doesn't include the basement, and a lot of times it could be a full basement underneath. But for example, in my house, we rebuilt our house, and we have a full basement, and that is where the kids hang out. That's where the TV's set up. They also have a room where they practice hockey down there. Like, it is very much part of how we use the house, and it is not treated like a basement in any way. When we were designing the house, we put in all the same kind of finishes and same kind of quality that we did for the rest of the house.
It's just below grade. Yeah, finished basements are huge here. Some people like Florida, they're all on slab, I think, or like most of the hot places seem to be on slab or beach places, and they don't get the basement. I relocated somebody from California, and they didn't have basements where they came from, and he kept saying, I need an outbuilding for my workshop, an outbuilding for my workshop. But most of the neighborhoods, you're getting a quarter, they didn't want to spend to get acres of land, and the zoning doesn't allow outbuildings, the thing that you need. I kept saying, we have basements here. You have the same footprint worth of basement down here. Every dad has a workbench in their basement here. And finally he did. He put one in his basement. So I love me some basements.
Yeah.
And especially
so we had a cottage property, and it had a basement, and the cottage property. So what we call cottages here are like houses, basically. And I would never do a basement near a water ever again, because we did have moisture issues, and we had to change the grading. And as the water changed, we had to change the grading again. So I think basements work in Toronto when, that's not an issue. But if you're in like a cottage property or a lake house, basements can be problematic for sure.
Yeah, you should build it. Anything near water should be built on stilts from now going forward for the most part. And I think that can get you out of, at least in the US, it's all about elevation, so it can get you out of flood insurance sometimes. Don't quote me on that. Talk to your insurance person, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, if for nothing else, you don't have to deal with it flooding. So we talked a little bit about what the landscape is like, or people probably got a little bit out of what we were talking about, what it's like. Here, we'll compare it to here again. Here, we're hilly, and mountains. We got the Appalachian Mountains, but it's not like huge Colorado or Vermont or Whistler or anything like that. So what do you like there? Are you flat because it's close to the water?
We're flat. So yeah, so Toronto itself, first of all, we're along the water. So we have some beautiful beach communities along the water. And when Toronto was originally built, our downtown core was actually abutting the water, but we built one of our main thoroughfares by the water, and it's awful, and it's an eyesore. So they're fixing that as we speak. But there's like very pretty popular neighborhoods along the waterfront. And then throughout the city, there's tons of parks. There's all kinds of things for as far as entertainment and activities go. And then, like I said, we're driving distance to other things like skiing or hiking and camping. We have a lot of we have a lot of provincial parks. We have a lot of federal parks that you can go hiking and camping and doing all of those outdoor things as well. But the actual landscape of Toronto is relatively flat.
And to get to those parks and everything, because Toronto's kind of, you're sitting on Lake Ontario, but then all the other lakes are kind of around it too. So I'm guessing it's all flat. So do you have to drive out and around all these lakes to get to these other places, or?
No, I mean, so depends on what you want to do. So like if I want to go to Niagara Falls to go and see the Niagara Falls, that's like an hour and a half to 2 hour drive, an hour and a half actually about drive. If most people with cottage, like Blue Mountain was an hour and a half for us. And we actually had, that's where our waterfront place was, near Blue Mountain. But if we're talking about Muskoka, which probably is our most famous cottage area, and there's a lot of celebrities that have places up in Muskoka. They, like Cindy Crawford has a place in Muskoka. That would be about 2 hours drive from Toronto. But, you know, when you get crazy traffic in the summer, it could be more. But that's about a 2 hour drive. So and these provincial parks, there's stuff that's an hour away. There's stuff in the city. There's stuff that's 2 hours away. But everything is like less than 2 hours. And it's especially when we were kids, we would do day trips because my parents couldn't afford to do hotels or overnight stays. So we would drive the hour and a half, 2 hours, spend the day at a beach, for example, and then come home afterwards. And it was fantastic.
Yeah, that's great. It sounds like the driving and the infrastructure for that is pretty, it's a super modern city, so it makes sense that it would be, but you can get most places. Before I go to the next question, which I popped up here a little bit prematurely, do people stay in Toronto when they visit the falls, or where would people typically stay when they're visiting the falls?
Well, so we also have wine regions. We have like wine regions in Ontario, and there's two major wine regions. One's in Niagara, and one is in Prince Edward County. Prince Edward County is a little bit newer, but Niagara wine region is very well known. And so I think there's a ton of hotels in the fall, so people would actually stay there. But most people, when they visit Toronto, they make it a day trip to go to the falls. And we have a lot of like tourist buses that do that. As you know, you get on the bus at 7 a.m., you return at whatever time, and they take you and they show you around and all of that stuff. And I've actually
Maid of the Mist and walk underneath it. And
exactly.
all that.
Oh, you know, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Maid of the Mist. Yeah. So, and I've actually stayed on the American side and walked over to the Canadian side because we have a bridge there. I mean, you know, like, so it's pretty easy to do. And it's kind of neat seeing the falls from both sides of Canada, the US. So can't do that right now, but that's a pretty typical thing to do. And it's pretty great. So.
That sounds like a better idea too. The reverse. Toronto probably has a lot more to do with the food and culture, which we'll get to. And then just go as one of the attractions to the falls to check out. And I'm still waiting for them to let us climb in barrels and go over the edge. They haven't allowed us to do that yet, so I'll keep waiting. Somebody built a special barrel that you're supposed to like be able to do. Anybody could just get in the thing and do it or something. But anyway, so what? I skipped one. Commuting. We talked a little bit about the travel. You can get lots of places within a couple hours. Do people usually work in Toronto and then live in suburbs, or let's start with that?
Yeah, so when people talk about Toronto, there's Toronto, which is the core, and then there's the GTA, which is the Greater Toronto Area. And there's probably, I don't really know how many cities in the GTA, but probably 10 to 20 cities within the GTA. And it is very, very common to live in one city and work in another. So if I think of three cities that are just outside the GTA, outside of Toronto and the GTA, if you zoom in, I could show you on the map. So Mississauga to the west, Pickering to the east, and Markham to the north is three of the several cities in the GTA. It's very common for somebody to live in Mississauga and work in Toronto, or somebody to live in Markham and work in Pickering. there's no, even though the different cities do provide different things, it's very common for people to live and work throughout. And it's very common for you to move throughout the city, depending on your job and things like that and your point in life. So, I know several people who started off in Toronto when they were young and single because they wanted like the Toronto life. And then they would move up to a condo or a smaller house. But then when they really wanted something for a big family or just more space, they would move out to some of the suburbs where it's more affordable so that they could get more space. So that's that. So that is Toronto and the GTA. My biggest complaint about Toronto, quite honestly, is commute time. And that
Did you make a video on this?
I did make a video on this. And okay, so there's three major reasons for our commute time. One is it's the GTA. It's not just Toronto. So if you live and work in Toronto proper, your commute time is okay. But it's the GTA. So lots of people travel, and commute times can be an hour and sometimes more, depending on where you are. That's the first thing. The second thing is our subway system, for the size of city that we are, is not as extensive as it should be. So if you compare us to, say, like a New York or a Paris, we're infantile compared to them. Now, that said, the Toronto Transit System, which is the TTC, Toronto Transit Commission, which is our transit within Toronto, they're actually pretty good. They have subways and buses. They're clean, they're safe, and they're fairly reliable. But the issue is that the subway part of that isn't as extensive as it is. So because of that, if you have to take buses, your commute time is also more. And then the last thing that causes commute times to be long is construction. We have a housing boom in Toronto, so there's construction everywhere. We're also investing in our infrastructure, so we are getting more subways, but that's causing construction. And because we're a winter city as well, there's always things that people are fixing because of winter, like potholes and things like that. So yeah, commute time is
Well, that's okay because we're used to all that stuff. I always say we're a big logistics hub, and everything from the north goes through us to the south, and everything from the south goes through us to the north. And our roads, and the east is older than the west, so all the roads are old. We have winter, all these things, terrible roads. Something's always under construction. It's like New York City. There's also always, it's not scaffolding, it's those orange cones on some highway. You have to learn which one I have to take for the next 6 months instead of let's avoid that route. So that's nothing new to us. We'll be right at home as far as the roads go and that goes.
Yeah. And when you're buying, what I always tell people is you just need to think about that when you're buying, right? Because there are faster ways of commuting, right? But you just, that's a big consideration when you're buying. So, and we do have lots of options for commuting, but you just have to plan for it.
Yeah, and some people don't have to commute anymore, so that changes everything as well.
I hope you enjoyed the video, and like I said, this is part one of a two-part series. So the next part will deal with employers and also will deal with entertainment and housing in Toronto. The whole podcast was an hour long. I'm only doing 40 minutes as part of the two-part series. The first 20 minutes are actually all about me, so I didn't think it was important to include it, but I will put a link to the full video down below if you want to know more about me and learn about living in Toronto. With that, I just wanted to thank you for joining us, and if this is your first time to the channel, please like and subscribe. It really helps us out. And also hit that little bell notification so you know every single time that there's a new video. We love helping clients from around the world. So if you have any questions about living in Toronto, moving to Toronto, or buying and selling real estate in Toronto, we would love to help you out. So call, text, email, or WhatsApp, and we'll be sure to take care of you. Thanks for joining, and we'll see you soon.